Are we recording?
Yes.
Okay, good stuff. So, hey everyone, welcome to this week's lesson for our Bible study. I hope that you have been encouraged to pick up the book, The Attentive Life by Leighton Ford, and have begun the process of reading through the preface and now into chapter 1. Now, here's the thing. I'm going to just highlight some of the things that I really like about this book and about this chapter. I'm trying to figure out the best process of doing this, but my expectation is that you will watch this video and then do the reading, as I'm going to highlight some things that are valuable to me, and maybe that will be a way for all of us to be reflecting on some of the same topics and themes together, even if we're not having a great deal of discussion about it right now. So that's kind of the plan right now. But in going through this book by Leighton Ford, I am reminded of the significant amount of research and work he put into pulling this book together as he weaves all of these quotes and stories. He almost oversaturates it, in my opinion, at certain points, but all in the great purpose of reminding us of the value of what it means to be attentive, what it means to slow down and pay attention to the things that are around us as we celebrate the work of God through His grace that is with us in every moment of every day. In fact, you'll find that I have preached a few stories from this book to you on Sunday mornings, and so maybe as you read along, you can pick up some of the freebies that are there. But being attentive and paying attention is not something that is really all that novel or new. It's just a good reminder. In fact, in this book, in this month's Upper Room, as Patricia Bassett brought me, she reminded me that or showed me that there is a story in here about not hurrying, about slowing down and paying attention. And I really like Andrew Breeden, the gentleman who wrote this story and this reflection. I really like his take on what it means to not be in a hurry and to slow down. And he recalls a popular story of Lazarus. How many of you remember the story of Lazarus being raised from the dead? What is it that Jesus does that causes this story to be as dramatic as it is? But he takes too long to get over to Lazarus, where Lazarus can be healed. And people are getting angry about this. But Jesus is aware of the fact that God's timing is not the same as the timing that many of us have. In fact, things of life and death in the narrative of God's picture of the world, they do not hold the same kind of bearing as they do for us. But anyway, here in this story, Andrew Breeden talks about how important it is to slow down and to enjoy the moment of the day as it is, and not to rush past episodes of your life, regardless of how hard they are, because oftentimes it's in those episodes of our lives that we are learning, and that God is trying to encourage us to focus and to pay attention to what God is showing us. This story, as Leighton Ford reminds us, is also familiar. This story of paying attention and being attentive, as Leighton Ford reminds us in the book, also obviously is all throughout Scripture as people are calling out for God to show up. These are people who are paying attention to their surroundings and asking that God might be revealed right where they are. But I want to remind you, as Leighton Ford does, out of Matthew chapter 2, this Christmas selection. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who was born, the King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose, and we have come to worship him." I love the idea of the Magi looking to the sky. They were so well acquainted with the stars that they saw this new star and knew exactly what it meant, that Jesus had arrived, that he was coming. After they heard the king, they went on their way, and the star they had seen, when it rose, it went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and they worshipped him. And then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold and frankincense and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route. These magi are people who knew how to pay attention. I also think about the shepherds waiting out in the fields. I don't know how many of you have ever tended to sheep. It's not something I've done a lot of times in my life, but there were a couple of times when I was in Africa, when I was given the opportunity to stand out in Kenya in a field with a shepherd boy and watch the sheep. And let me tell you, it's not an exciting job. It's paying attention to your flock and protecting them and just kind of doing the things of the day. And there an angel of the Lord came and promised that Jesus was coming. So paying attention is a familiar thread that is kind of woven into the tapestry of Christian literature, obviously throughout Scripture, but even today in our devotions. But still, it is worth the reminder to slow down and to focus, because there is another narrative that is pushing against that and is resisting that as we live our lives in the world today. And that narrative is the culture of now, the culture of you're too late, the culture of you're too far behind to ever catch up. Why don't you purchase this product that will speed up things and make things happen faster and faster. These are the words of culture. But I love Dorothy Bass, who is quoted right here at the beginning of chapter 1, and who says this: "Time is not our enemy." I know that time is often marketed to be our enemy, but it's not our enemy, nor is time a hostile place from which we must flee. No, time is a meeting place, a point of rendezvous with God. Sorry, I've got some things that are going on around behind me. Time is a meeting place, a point of rendezvous with God. This is time is but a place where we are able to come to know who God is. And so the way that Leighton Forward begins by talking about the value of time as something that is a rendezvous, a place in which we can meet with God, is by talking about praying according to the Benedictine hours. Now, some of you may have heard of this before. Some of you might not have heard of this before. It's okay, either way. It's how he chooses to structure the rest of the book, and it's also a way in which he has chosen to live his life as a kind of a spiritual practice. He acknowledges the hours in the day that have been set out historically to pray different types of prayers and take note of who God is for the moment. And so this is what is actually listed here on page 21, if you'll go with me there in your books. Let's see, page 21, I had it marked so I can go there quickly, but there we go. The divine hours, according to the Benedictines, are Benedictine order. The divine hours, as traditionally practiced by religious orders, usually include the following: the vigils around 3 a.m. How many of you are awake at 3 a.m.? How many of you wish you were not awake at 3 a.m.? There are the lauds, the greeting at the beginning of the day, prime, the start of the day's work, terce, the third hour, perhaps mid-morning, sext, midday, none at mid-afternoon, vespers as the day is over and the evening comes, and then the compline when the day is complete and sleep begins. And I may actually be mispronouncing a couple of these, but I'm doing the best I can with them. The point of all of these prayers, though, is simply to open our eyes. Hey, Grayson, will you do me a favor? I've got my helper here. Will you close those doors, that one and this one over here? Okay. Thank you. So praying the hours is simply a process of opening our eyes. And so the first thing that Leighton Forward does is offer an invitation for us to pay attention. One of the things, though, that I thought was really valuable, and again, you'll see this on page 26, is an emphasis on the great theologian and political figure of Augustine, who defines sin actually to be this: incurvatus in si, which is curved in on one's self. The Quaker writer Douglas Steere defined sin as inattention, for prayer is awakeness, attention, intense inward openness. In a certain way, sin could be described as anything that destroys this attention. I am always, as a pastor, looking for ways of talking about these complicated ideas of things like sin and redemption. And I think this is an extremely valuable way for us to consider the importance of attentiveness, is that to be inattentive to the work of God around us could actually be another definition for sinfulness, which is simply paying attention to and being distracted by anything that is not of God. So the first thing that Leighton Ford wants us to do is to be invited to pay attention. And he explains why. He says that God himself is the great attender. I'm not going to go into real detail on these next two, but he takes note that God pays attention. And I love that he details the story of Adam and Eve in the beginning, where God creates the world. And not only does God create the world, but God cares about the world and tends to the world even after it's been created. He didn't start this thing like a domino effect and let life just beget life and continue on as it does. No. God creates and orders society and the world in the way that it was intended in the beginning, but then God tends to it and listens. What is it that God says when Adam and Eve have gone and hidden themselves away because they have created sin and they have fallen into the temptation of biting the apple or the fruit of the tree that they were not supposed to? They go, they're embarrassed, and they hide themselves away. And what does God do but call out to them? Where are you? God cares. God attends to us. God is the great attender. The third thing that I have here that Leighton Ford does out of 4 is he wants us to imagine, and we don't really have to imagine. I think we all have felt this idea. But imagine that God is not paying attention. Again, this is a way of understanding the value of what it means that God does pay attention, is to imagine a God who doesn't care. That's a horrible reality, in my opinion, is to think about a God who is just doing God's thing but does not actually care about us as humans. This is when Leighton Ford uses the term about God being a sleeping God. I think about God and God's distance in this moment and the value of what it means that God sometimes does feel distant to us. I reflect on what that might mean for us as Christians, as lovers of God. And I think about how we might grow as lovers of God and people who are attentive to the work of God whenever it feels like God is asleep. I'll explain why. I was just talking to someone earlier today about, don't make those noises. I was just talking to someone today who about parenting. And there's a whole thing here, but I'm going to try and keep this pretty short, which is that back in the 90s or so, you may have heard the term helicopter parenting. This is when parents would hover over their kids and kind of do everything for them and with them, and they were almost too close to their children, and it created some problems for those children as they grew up because they were so used to having the aid of their parents constantly nearby that when their parents weren't nearby, they were not always prepared to deal with things. The second term, sorry, I've got Grayson over here and he's writing. Grayson, please make sure you're not making noise. The second term that I have heard when it comes to parenting is a new one. It's called snowplow parenting. These are parents who go ahead of their kids and they make sure to get rid of all the blockades and all the barriers before the kids ever have a chance to experience them themselves. These are parents who will call their kids' college professors and complain about the grades that they received. Obviously, it's not designed to be this way, and there is value in facing resistance. But parents that remove the resistance actually inhibit the ability of their child to be independent over time. And that can create, again, some ill-intended effects, which comes from a good place of love. I think about this as I think about the sleeping God, is that sometimes I don't know that God is asleep. In fact, I know that God's not asleep. I know that it's not that God doesn't care. No, it's that sometimes I believe that God is paying attention, but as the hymn says, and as Leighton Ford quotes, God who is in the shadows, sometimes allowing us to learn what it means to live the life that we need to live. I think there is a lot of growth that can happen when we feel as though God is asleep or away. The last thing that Leighton Ford offers that I think is valuable for us today is it can be seen on page 47, beginning on page 47 anyway. And these are the qualities. Actually, I wrote 47. I think it's right before that. Let's see. Forgive me. Yep, here we go. 37, not 47. On page 37, we can see the qualities of what it means to be attentive, being fully present in the moment. Actually giving the time to look for long enough, looking freshly at what is familiar, being available, becoming aware, waiting with expectancy, being mindful, and being wakeful. These are all qualities of what it means to be attentive. And so, I want to finish where we began, thinking about the Magi, thinking about the shepherds who are paying attention and waiting for Jesus' arrival. And I want to encourage you, as you are reading this chapter, to take the same posture that those people did in becoming more aware of the incarnation. This is the reality, the revelation, the coming alive. It's sometimes we use these words like a magician, like the reveal, the magician pulling the rabbit out of a hat. It was there all along, right? The reveal of Jesus to be right where you are. And so I have a couple of questions for you to consider as you go throughout the week and as you continue on in your reading. The first question is this: have you considered what it might mean to organize your day in a kairos kind of way and not a chronos kind of way? These are two Greek words for that translate the English word time. Chronos is an ordered sequencing of events. Every day, time moves as it does. But Jesus actually uses the word kairos on occasion. And the translation of kairos could be ordering your time upon multiple opportunities, right? So what would it mean for you to order your day in such a way that you are looking to go from opportunity to pay attention to God? The second thing is, what does it mean for God to pay attention to you? How might that change your day? How might that change the way you think or do? What does it mean for God to be the one who pays attention? And then the last thing is, how is God's presumed absence shaping you? I think all of us have times where we wonder what God's up to. But I wonder how that presumed absence might be shaping you. I would love to see any thoughts you have. In fact, if you can figure it out, there is a comment section below this video. You can post any comments that you'd like there. This would be a way for us to have conversation with each other. I promise, if you make a comment below, I will reply to your comment, so long as it's within the week. And I want to encourage you to tune in next Monday, where we will have another one of these teaching moments together. I hope that you enjoy the book. I hope that you are becoming more attentive to God that's around you. I hope you're being challenged, as I am, to be reminded of the value of looking and listening, paying attention to God, who's right here with you right now. All right, until next time, Grayson, will you stand up and push that red button one more time? We'll catch you next time.
Okay,
all right.
bye.
Bye.